So, hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Search podcast. Excited today to be joined by Sidney Pearl, and today we're going to be looking at the influences of AI on the evolving cybersecurity landscape. So, Sid, we've known each other for a few years now, but for the listeners who don't know who you are, could you please give us a bit of a background and introduction to yourself?
Yeah, hi Dave. Thanks for having me today. I'm Sid Pearl. I'm currently the CEO and founder of Cykology. Cykology focuses on AI forensic psychology. It's an interesting topic in the context of how AI evolves. There's going to be a need for forensic psychologists to be able to evaluate that AI through the same or similar type of lens as we evaluate humans and within the criminal environment in criminal investigation. So psychology is going to bring this human-computer interface approach through the lens of forensic psychology, and we'll be helping clients around the world in that capacity. My background is prior United States Navy of 20 years. I've also worked in both, or collectively in a combined or combination of intelligence as well as cyber intelligence, cybersecurity, and I've been in the cybersecurity industry now for the last 25 plus years.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction there, Sid. And with all this experience, 25, 30 plus years experience in kind of IT, technology, and cybersecurity more specifically, you said with psychology you're kind of focusing on cyber forensics. So talk me through, the kind of the need you've identified there. Why cyber forensics? Why is that such an important issue?
Well, I would argue that it goes beyond cyber forensics. In the world of law enforcement globally today, the challenge is that international law enforcement as well as U.S. domestic law enforcement struggle and are challenged with even be able to address traditional computer forensics in the way that they operate. So the ability to hire, train, and retain qualified resources to do computer digital forensics in the traditional way today is a major challenge. What we see is AI is going to leapfrog all of that. And knowing that international law enforcement as well as the criminal courts do not have the skills to be able to address these types of challenges, what I see is a convergence of artificial intelligence and human interaction in such a way as this. As an example, the challenges that the world will face in the future when we start combining artificial intelligence with humanoid robotics and various other forms of robotics is where is the point of origin by which an artificial intelligence was interfered with? How do you make that determination? How do you combine the thinking of an artificial intelligence, how it evolved, and then what changes did it make on its own? How do you look at that through the lens of forensic psychology from an artificial intelligence perspective, and then be able to evaluate that through a criminal-based analysis for criminal investigation and serve an expert witness testimony? So this is where we see it going from the view of psychology, and this is where we see the opportunity to be able to help those as this world's evolved. Another example is Project Stargate that President Trump just recently announced in late January 2025. As the world evolves and moves this direction, as the United States sets, per their perspective, sets the tone, tenor, and leadership using platform capabilities like Project Stargate to be able to implement in a $500 billion investment, then naturally all countries want to lead in the area of artificial intelligence. The challenges we face are is ethics, integrity, the ability to be able to determine how and where artificial intelligence was interfered with, and then when court cases begin, who do you hold accountable? The originating company that developed the artificial intelligence, the AI itself, because it had the ability to evolve as we move into artificial general intelligence. So there's going to be a lot of challenges in this area, and the need to be able to understand both international law, artificial intelligence, down to the technical level and engineering level is going to be a convergence in that capacity, and that's where we see psychology having a role to play in the future.
And to help with my understanding then, just to understand the kind of the extent of the problem potentially that's posed out there, you've identified there's this big kind of gap, this labor gap or skills gap, for want of a better phrase, where, even with traditional forensics, there's an inability to kind of keep up pace AI is only going to kind of advance that, create more sophisticated and much kind of wider attacks. What's the real world problem without understanding, without having these sort of capabilities out there, just to really kind of help me understand, the work that psychology is doing?
So let's take, for example, generative artificial intelligence as it stands today. Large language models are being developed by multiple companies, not just the large tech companies as we know them today. So everyone wants to get in on the game of artificial intelligence. So as everyone wants to get in on the game, naturally everyone sees the opportunity to make big money and generate large profits and revenue for their companies. The challenge is that the bad actors, the threat actors themselves, see the same opportunities. So as the companies develop and are moving rapidly into their development life cycles for these artificial intelligence, generative AI, and then in the future AGI, then the bad actors are equally have their own labs and capabilities to evaluate this technology and determine avenues by which they can inject themselves into the process by which they can cause harm. So for example, whether you're talking about nuclear missiles, whether you're talking about nuclear energy, if AI is going to be propagated and promulgated around the world the way that they are foreseeing and predicting, then AI will literally touch everything in our lives in the future, to include robotics. So when you think about it through that lens, who is actually going to have the skills to be able to investigate and determine where was the point of origin? How did someone interfere with this technology? And then how do you make a determination as to whether or not it was the originating company that developed the AI, or the AI was mature and evolved enough to be able to make its own determination to move in a certain direction? I would argue at this point in time in the development of artificial intelligence, it will be threat actors that inject themselves into the process that will cause damage in the future to these operating environments. As we move forward, though, as we move closer to AGI over the next 5 to 10 years, it will be the thinking AI that has the opportunity to make a determination. And there again lies a larger challenge in the future. So it is through that development, without getting too technical, as to where we see some of the challenges in the future. And as I said, we feel that we can be on the cutting edge of that conversation and help bridge the gap and bring that level of knowledge and expertise. So our goal is to bring the subject matter experts in the context of AI engineering, AI discovery and science in the context of evolution of artificial intelligence, with an overlay of forensic psychology. And as you look at these worlds and how they come together, your traditional forensic psychologist or traditional human psychologist will say there's no point of connection between these two worlds. I argue differently. If society and companies are looking to create an artificial general intelligence that is operating similar to a human or has the ability to think faster than a human, then why shouldn't we be thinking about artificial intelligence through the lens of forensic psychology? Because they are wanting to emulate the human brain. Therefore, it is my argument and opinion, my humble opinion, that a need for forensic psychologists focused on artificial intelligence is going to be needed in the future.
So it sounds like to me, and apologies if A, I've butchered this, please correct me, or, B, if it sounds like a massive simplification, but it sounds like we're in a current kind of state. It's almost like the Wild West, like everyone's trying to build AI models. Everyone's trying to get ahead. Obviously, there's a lot of money to be kind of made in AI, and you can't really go 5 minutes without seeing AI marketed to you in some capacity. And with all these companies developing new AI, the opportunities for attacks and all the bad actors kind of using AI is just exacerbated. So while everyone's sort of focused on developing AI, you're more concerned and focused on, we've not got anyone putting the guardrails in place at the moment, and we've not got people So this is, from my understanding, where the forensics comes into it, holding people accountable and actually understanding where did we go wrong. Is that, have I kind of got that assumption right? So when everyone else is focused on building the AI and the AI tools, you're thinking, well, actually, we're going to have to think about the guardrails here. And to put the guardrails in place, we need to actually be able to identify who's gone wrong, where's gone wrong, and what's caused this. Is that right?
It's partially correct. I would say that one slight correction is that there are companies wanting to build ethics and integrity into AI, and I would classify that as guardrails. So governance, ethics, those types of modalities and methodologies, they are working on that. The challenge is that a lot of companies are willing to bypass that because they want to be the first to market, right? So I would say that where psychology is going to come in with its forensic analysis is that as companies look to move forward to bypass those guardrails that you outlined, they will say that they are putting in place the guardrails. And I'm not here to argue to determine that they are or aren't putting those guardrails in place. All that I'm suggesting is that there are going to be some that are not. They are going to bypass the guardrails in order to get to market fastest. Because when you have enormous investment coming in and you're a startup, you have enormous pressure in order to be able to achieve the revenue goals that your investors are looking for. And I'm not looking to pick a fight with anyone in the context of this conversation. All I'm suggesting is that as these companies move and accelerate down this path of their development, guardrails will be bypassed in order to be the first to market to achieve their objectives. And it is our opinion that psychology will have a role to play to be able to help law firms as well as corporations and individuals and humanity that will be impacted by this to be able to serve as an expert in this domain to be able to help determine how and why these types of activities occurred, whether it evolved naturally on its own or whether there was an inject coming in from a threat actor from an outside point of view. This is where we believe psychology will have a major role to play to help through, or should I say, help analyze and then determine and advise on where the potential impact occurred.
Well, thank you for that clarification, and apologies for not kind of getting that necessarily correct. You mentioned robotics and specifically humanoid robotics earlier. I think it's a fascinating area. So I'd be keen to get your kind of thoughts and wisdom on, the role that you think AI and the developments in AI are going to play on the sort of the development of robotics and humanoid robotics in the coming years.
Well, if you look at the history of Tesla and how the car itself, a computer on wheels, if we can simplify that through the lens of Tesla and these vehicles, all you have to do, it doesn't take any extensive research to go out and determine where this is headed and the work that is being done. So if you extrapolate from this what Tesla is doing in the context of what they have built and with their vehicles and now moving toward autonomous vehicles, it's not a stretch to determine where they're going with humanoid robotics. So if you're looking to take a similar type of platform as to moving from electric vehicles that are computers on wheels to autonomous vehicles, which they are now going to be rolling out in 2025 in Austin, Texas. It's going to be a fully autonomous environment for a lot of taxis and car services in Austin. And certainly I welcome and encourage our listeners to go out and do that research. It's not then a far stretch to determine where we're going with humanoid robotics. And I would argue that Tesla and many others are going to be on the cutting edge as part of that trend and evolution moving into humanoid robotics. Research indicates, and again, I'm not going to call out specific research forums that we looked into. I will only say it and paraphrase. Research indicates that between the now and end of 2030, they're estimating they could potentially roll out up to 100 million humanoid robotics. And again, I encourage our listeners to go out and listen to that. Does that introduce challenges? I would argue that similar to everything else we've discussed here in the context of AI evolution converging with humanoid robotics, if someone has the ability to hack into or inject themselves into the code of that operating environment, that then has the ability to learn, much like a hive mind. When these vehicles were learning what they're learning through the autonomous driving environment, they're capturing all that data, and it's going back to what I call the hive mind environment. So that information is then shared across all those vehicles so that they don't replicate or have a similar type of experience and can adapt to that operating environment. They're applying that same approach to humanoid robotics as we move forward. Now, granted, there's going to be a lot of value in humanoid robotics. I'm not here to downplay the value. From healthcare to the ability to be able to help people at home, to help with all types of activities, including in manufacturing. Also, I would say in safety and security, you'll be able to send humanoid robotics into highly emergency related or high emergency related situations, whether it's a fire or something along those lines, to be able to help save people in a way that maybe others in humans, for example, would not be able to do so in the past. So there's going to be great value in that context. However, on the flip side of that conversation, let's say that someone, a threat actor or threat actors, has the ability to hack into that hive mind and has the ability to inject code that can be detrimental to those humanoid robotics. What are the safeguards and guardrails in place to prevent that from happening? And then who then comes in and helps to evaluate, conduct an investigation, and be able to help people understand where it went wrong and what type of damage could incur or come from that type of situation. So humanoid robotics are on their way, and it will take a little time for them to get introduced, but it does not take much research for anyone to go out and find out that we are on the cusp. So when those two worlds come together of artificial intelligence with bipedal humanoid robotics, that then gets introduced in the environment, and they look to then bring that down to the day-to-day human level operating environment, then what happens when that hive mind that's connected to the larger environment gets hacked into, and the damage it then translates into that then reaches out into the human environment, down all the way down to, I'd say, the consumer and at their own homes. So that's kind of the trend, and I'm deliberately keeping it very high level, but those are the trends that we see coming, and that have both pros and cons as to the impact of human society.
Wow, it's scary. I think, as you mentioned there, particularly in the case of emergency response, there's so many like positive use cases, but it's scary to think about what bad actors have the potential to do if we've got these hundreds or hundreds of thousands of humanoid robots kind of roaming the streets. If they're at the mercy of kind of like a bad actor, it's scary to think what ramification that could have. What do you think's the kind of the most important, step, or the most important kind of take home for people that are kind of consuming AI, whether it's in, like, obviously we talk about humanoid robotics, but generally, you mentioned earlier, and I can't remember the specific terminology you used, but you talked about how AI is trying to replicate the human mind. Do you think we need to work more closely with AI so it can understand the human mind more closely? Or do you think, the risks of working more and inviting AI into our lives more is more of a risk than it's a benefit?
Well, I use the simplistic terms of a tool is a tool, right? Tools throughout history have been used for good and bad purposes. And I see AI, or any technology for that matter, that humanity can evolve with, no different. The challenge we have is that the race to win in the AI domain is concerning because the guardrails can be removed that enables that accelerated path. And so when looking at it through that lens, then who is going to ultimately come to the aid of humanity and be able to help police that environment in such a way to where it is not detrimental? So if we are in an AI race, which many argue that we are, then and government is equally investing in AI at a rapid pace to become the first country. So you have a convergence of activities that are happening. There are countries that want to be the first, and you have companies that want to be the first. And if that's the case, then everybody's on the same page in the context of what they're trying to achieve. And that means being the first is the first most important goal that we're trying to achieve. And setting that foundation will then ultimately lead to a point where the guardrails potentially may not be in place. And so if you look at it through that perspective, then I think those are the challenges that we face. Now, again, I'm not saying that there won't be good things to come from this. By no means am I saying that. I think there's a lot of good things that can come from this. It's just that we need to be aware, not fearful, but we need to be aware as to what the trends are and where this is going. And if you bury your head in the sand, then you're making a huge mistake by not paying attention to what's happening. Because, and I know this is something that you and I have discussed before, is then this moves into the jobs conversation, right? What is going to happen to jobs? So if everyone's fearful but today about what artificial intelligence is going to do how it could impact their job, then you can imagine what the fear is going to be if a humanoid robot comes into your operating environment and takes your physical job on a manufacturing line, which some robotic arms have already done. So that fear was going to continue to be exacerbated. So my proposal to everyone listening to this is, first of all, knowledge is your friend. So really do your research, understand what the trends are, understand how it can be of value, and to the point of jobs and how potentially AI and perhaps humanoid robotics can impact you, then have enough awareness and knowledge as to what actions can you take to be able to rise above the machines. Okay, so rising above the machines will be a critical path for anyone that's looking to operate within this environment. And I would also add one other point, and that is if you want to be part of what I call the AI economy, then your skills are going to need to adapt in order to be able to do that. So learning new skills, reskilling, upskilling, and being knowledgeable on how to operate in your domain of expertise and understanding how that's going to be affected, and allowing, or should I say, leveraging humanoid robotics for what they are for, which is a tool, then you become a person that can work with those humanoid robotics and help influence that environment versus sitting on the sidelines waiting for them to come in and take over your job or something else within your environment. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think although AI is, new, we've had these kind of instances in the past, well, not in my lifetime anyway, but, with kind of automation of assembly lines and various kind of tools and machinery that came out in the past, there was probably this kind of fear that people's jobs were getting replaced there. Fast forward however many years, and obviously people still have jobs, we're still contributing to the economy. So people that are listening to this that are a little bit worried don't need to be necessarily. There's a way of staying ahead, but it's important to sort of understand, what can AI do? What can't it do? And how can I get ahead? How can I augment, or how can I change and adapt and evolve my skill set to kind of complement AI? I think quite often people talk and worry about AI stealing their job. It won't necessarily be AI. It will probably be someone using AI. So you can either submit and just say AI is going to steal my job, or you can learn to become that person who's running the AI, who's kind of using that as a tool, as you mentioned.
So the question I asked the audience, Dave, and I'd say this in the broadest sense possible, is if you're not part of the evolution and you get caught up in the process by which AI potentially can impact your environment and you haven't reskilled or upskilled, and let's say that something like that hypothetically happens on a mass situation where people are just not prepared to make the transition, and people haven't been able to reskill or upskill, what is the societal impact to that, to the economy, to the stability of our environments, to our communities? There are, I would say, cascading effects. And again, this isn't designed to be fear a fear-driven situation, but is designed to be informing. And that is that if you really do need to reskill and upskill, you need to become part of this AI evolution and this AI economy that we're going to be participating in. Now, with all of that said, the balance to that is that as we move into equally another area, which is immersive technologies, for example, whether we're talking about mixed reality, virtual reality, extended reality, etc., and I put that encapsulated into mixed reality. When those worlds converge of, again, artificial intelligence and mixed reality, are we going to potentially see another situation where versus looking at our cell phones, we're now immersed in these mixed realities, which equally can be an addictive situation. So we really are facing some societal challenges as a race, and it's just something that we need to be paying attention to so that we can be part of it and not being run over by it. Hopefully that provides a little additional insight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of people and there's a lot of concern about jobs, and jobs of the future, a topic we've spoken, quite a lot about. And, I think we'd both be incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful if we could, guess with complete accuracy what those jobs are going to look like. I think it's interesting understanding from people's perspective the kind of the expectation on government or expectation on businesses to educate people. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of education out there. Businesses aren't necessarily guiding their employees because they don't have the answers as to your job's going to become redundant, or at least this portion of the role is going to become redundant because we're bringing these tools. This is where you need to upskill and learn and study. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of the onus or a lot of the kind of responsibility is probably on the employees at this point. So, as you said, I kind of implore anyone that's interested, concerned, wanting to learn more about the topic, do kind of read into it, understand where AI is at the moment, what how you can use your skills to kind of augment, how you can use your skills to kind of complement AI, and ensure that you're kind of not getting run over, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's an evolutionary process, and we can sit back and say, well, it's the government's responsibility, or it's law enforcement's responsibility, or it's the company's responsibility. Truthfully, in this situation, it's the individual's responsibility. It's the parents' responsibility. And I'm not looking to get too philosophical here. I'm just simply saying that this is not one of those transitions that some would argue that is similar to what we went through during the Industrial Revolution. I disagree. I think this is going to be far more tectonic in the shift that we're going to see. And while I will say that I agree that the transition took much longer because of what we went through, going from horse and buggy into tractors, and then being able to do more advanced farming, and then getting into vehicles. That took an evolutionary period. The transition and changes that we're going through now are moving at such a rapid pace that if you're not paying attention, then you will be swept up and swept through the process, and not knowing then what actions to take. So the balance of saying, I want to use a technology but not be aware of the technology, is not a luxury that most will have the ability to say. So while the large companies will want you to consume the technology, it is of my opinion that you have to be responsible enough to have an awareness about the technology so you can make informed decisions. And that includes, what is the impact to my job? What is the impact to my family? What is the impact to government? What is the impact to society? And then how am I going to participate in the AI economy in the future? So it really does come down to a personal responsibility, and not assuming that the government or corporations are going to be doing this on your behest or your behalf, that's looking out for your greatest interest. Remember, first to market, first country to be to market, and the first companies to be to market are looking to set the foundation. If you are part of that, great. If you're not, then you will be left behind. And that is the challenge, which then assumes that you're going to take the necessary action and responsibility to become part of that AI economy. Because putting your head in the sand is not really going to be an option. You can you can do so, but then you're preparing to go off grid, as they say, as you get into these types of topics of conversation. So those are the challenges we're facing. Equally, opportunities that we're going to be able to pursue. And I welcome the opportunity to discuss this further with you and in your audience as well.
Perfect. So while all these companies, governments and nations are busy in this kind of AI race, it's on us as kind of individuals to understand what roles look like in the future, where we can sort of evolve. You mentioned as businesses are so consumed with kind of being first to market, because if you're not first, you're last. There will be certain guardrails that may or may not be passed, and with that comes heightened risk. We then talked about the opportunity with robotics and specifically humanoid robotics and how that evolution might look at in the future, the good, the bad, and potential predictions for that. And also we kind of ended with talking about how jobs of the future, such a important issue that we've spoken about quite a lot, how that's going to evolve. And I think to kind of summarize that final point, it's very much we implore the listeners of this podcast to do their own reading, do their own research, because their business, their government is so focused and so consumed in this AI race that they're probably not looking at what role are you going to fill in the future. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Sid?
We're operating through the lens of what is the world going to look like tomorrow with AI? And then when AI is developed from the point of view of developing it similar to a human brain, and it is operating similar to a human, then how do you apply forensic psychology to that? It is something that both law firms, or a combination of law firms, law enforcement, and companies are going to be challenged with. And the skills currently do not exist in the marketplace today, which is precisely why psychology wants to bring these skills and capabilities to bear so we can help these organizations sort through these challenges that they're going to face in the future.
Thank you very much for your time. Once again, it's great for us connecting, and I'm really glad to have you on the AIM Search podcast and contributing your thoughts. I'm sure the listeners will value it also.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time today.